Live and online, it's Sleepless with Steve and the Movie Book Club with your host, Steve Pulaski.
Back and better than ever, it is Sleepless with Steve. We are live on YouTube on this Wednesday evening, wherever you may be, however you may be listening. Gruesome twosome at it again. We are Sans Joe. It is me and Dominic Guanzon. First things first, shout out to Dominic for running the show tonight. I know it takes quite a bit of manpower to run this operation to let me bloviate on another platform, so I greatly appreciate Dom's sacrifice tonight. As we talk The Substance, the brand new Demi Moore movie, we will get into that, and then we will also be mulling over the future. I completely forgot about this year, and then it was, I believe Joe reminded us in the group chat about National Cinema Day that mysteriously came and went, or didn't come at all this year. So we're going to talk about that for the second half of the show today. So looking forward to it. We're going to have a really good discussion on The Substance too, which I'm very looking forward to. First things first, how are you, Dom?
I'm doing all right. I just dropped my light. So, and everything I have is in either dark mode or it's like a black poster like The Substance. So that's great. That's why I suddenly got dark around here. No, doing fine. We had a wonderful time. Joe and I had a wonderful time at his graduation party for his master's degree. It was a very good time. He rented a party bus, and it was a good time with the old fellows. So we had a wonderful time. Matt Hale was there. That's all that matters. That's all you need for a good time. But a bunch of other people were as well.
A lot of mutuals. I can take it.
Yeah, obviously more so for Joe. There was one gentleman there who I will not name, just because I don't know if they want to be mentioned, but they might be watching. But one gentleman from Seattle who came all the way just for Joe. Who was
That's my excuse.
Yeah, but he had been Xbox friends. They met over Xbox, and I just think that's a wonderful gamer moment, beautiful gamer moment. And apparently, Joe and him hung out around Chicago. We bought him his first. I don't know if we bought it for him. Joe bought him his first Portillo's dog, Chicago dog.
Nice.
And he said that he liked it. I hope he was telling the truth, but I believe him.
Yeah, because they just have like rain to drink and eat over in Seattle, don't they? Is that
Give
right?
or take, yeah.
And the loudest NFL stadium and the Needle, and that's about all I know about Seattle. Would love to go, but love to go on the West Coast. But that's awesome. That is a really cool story. You know, it's always fun when you see those kind of things every now and then, like people who meet over like Xbox or the internet, and then they finally meet in person. And you know what I mean? And
100%.
it doesn't end up like a P. Diddy situation, which is really nice, you know? So I had to get a name drop in somewhere on the show.
Department of Justice got a good name drop in as well.
Yes, they did. So we are going to talk The Substance, though. A brand new Demi Moore movie. I think almost probably gave Dom a coronary. I did not. If I would have had an illusion, I knew there was body horror in this movie. If I would have had, let me just say this: if I would have seen this and it was not scheduled for Sleepless, I probably would have talked to Joe and been like, "I don't think we should put him through this. I don't think we should." But I had the talk trademark. I'm like, I'm not sure we should do this to him, but we did. Like we stayed away from long legs. Like we didn't touch longs. I'm like this is a movie like I don't get unnerved by horror movies very much anymore, and that movie unnerved me.
Mm-hmm.
Like so I'm like somebody like you who doesn't love horror movies and doesn't love like grotesque body horror. Holy hell, were you treated to like 2.5 hours of something disgusting with The Substance? First off, I just want to say this, and this pretty much applies to like very few people, but I just want to give out my soapbox here for a minute. I'm just going to read. I think it's actually just easier if I just read the opening paragraph of my review. And you'll see where I'm going with this in a second. Review at stevepulaski.com. But I said, growing up and getting older isn't always so bad. For example, one day you're a teenager making an account on an overseas social networking site for film lovers and subsequently arguing with cinephiles more than double your age. And over the years, you see it transform into a laudable streaming service and eventually a quietly powerful mecca for art house film distribution. Then as you're rapidly approaching 30, you see that website's same logo before one of the best movie experiences you've had in theaters all year. Tip of the cap movie. Glory to your rising empire, and thank you for all you've done. This movie was distributed in the UK and the US by a company called Mubi, M-U-B-I. And I remember I made an account on that website. It started as a social networking website that had very few movies to watch, and the few movies that they had to watch were very art house, a lot of overseas cinema because they're based in the UK. So it was a lot of French movies, a lot of Belgian movies, but it was a really delightful social networking site. And it was like, and the funny thing was, like, at the time I was on this site, and I still am on this, I still actually use the site quite often. But at the time, like, it was a social networking site and you could contribute to it. Um, I remember, like, initially, because I loved message boards back in the day, I remember being like so intimidated by it. Like the threads and stuff and the topics were like, which Jean-Luc Godard movie was the most disappointingly unpolitical, and things like that. And like what is a good starting point for Turkish cinema and things like that, you know? And so it opened my eyes to world cinema. It really did. And then slowly over the years, the social networking aspect of it kind of dissolved and died in like 2016. There's no longer a message board on the site. They radically changed this site to be a more of a streaming service. So the most social networking you get out of it is you are able to leave a star rating on movies and then like a 500 word blurb on your thoughts and things like that. But either way, though, I've watched a few movies on Mubi. And this was, I think, the first major one that I saw in theaters, and it just gave me a real sense of like, you know, like, man, this site's come so far from what it was, and now it's distributing what I think is one of the best movies of the year, and I love it, and I'm really happy for them. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I actually, speaking of, honestly, we touched on Joe meeting his Xbox friend from Seattle. I've made a lot of friends from that site that I still am in touch with today.
That's good.
From Facebook and
Just
things
purely
like that.
purely online friends that you've never met in real life.
Correct. But yeah,
That's wonderful. I love that because I've got a number of those as well.
Yeah.
Steve's internet might be cutting out here, but I've got a number of those as well. And I think I've only met like one or two of them. And there's like dozens that I would love to meet someday. Some of them from all over the world, like Australia, the Philippines, Europe, definitely for sure. So yeah, one day. It's always nice.
So no, so that was a really cool part of it, though. Yeah, and there's something special about those kind of like online friendships. You know what I mean? Like, that are cultivated because they're based on a mutual love of something. And yeah, Mubi's just a great site. And I told Catherine, actually, when I was writing my review of The Substance, I said, you know what? I would bet by 2030. Now, I don't know if they're going to go full. I don't think they're going to go full blown streaming service. I think that would be a terrible idea for them. But I could see Letterbox Studios becoming a thing.
Yeah.
I absolutely could. I think now that they've been acquired too, I think they have more capital. I could see that down the road, and I'd be interested to see what kind of movies they would release.
If you want to keep funding Letterbox Studios, just keep writing reviews. Just keep churning out content for Letterbox for free.
Pretty much. That's what I did for Movie all those years. I still do it. The Substance, though. This is a new movie directed by Coralie Faja. And this is her second movie. I never did see her first one, Revenge. Guilty me. There's so much to this movie. The Cliff Notes plot of this movie is it involves a woman named Elizabeth Sparkle. She's a award-winning actress, and she's been the host of this like aerobics fitness show. She's played by Demi Moore. And she's starting to age and fade in popularity. The network executive, played by Dennis Quaid, who, in my opinion, absolved all sins of the Reagan movie with this movie. That's just my opinion. This was an absolutely terrific performance I did not see coming. But he's a TV executive, and what he does is he basically ousts her. And she decides to start taking this black market drug. It's like this cell-replicating substance that creates a younger, better version of yourself. Now, the condition of this is that the younger self, there's only you. They keep saying that there's only one. There's not her or she. There's one. But the younger version of yourself and yourself, for lack of a better explanation, they cannot coexist at the same time. They have to live off one another through like spinal fluids as well as fluids provided through this black market drug company. So they live 7 days at a time. And if they break the rule of living longer than 7 days at a time, then there winds up being drastic consequences for the other. And Margaret Qualley, who was in Drive Away Dolls earlier this year, she plays Elizabeth's younger self, who goes by the name Sue. So Sue is a younger model. She winds up taking Elizabeth's job as the aerobics TV fitness instructor and things like that. And basically Elizabeth starts to get tries to live vicariously through her initially, but then gets incredibly envious, and it leads to disastrous, gonzo, disgusting consequences that make for a great time at the movies. It's like I called it a Cronenbergian take on Showgirls, and because that's what it really reminded me of, was those two things. At any rate, Dom, you are not one for body horror. You are not one for horror movies. You're not one for gross shit. What did you think of this?
Oh boy. The Substance has a lot to say around really one central question, right? One central topic, one central interrogative, which is, how far are you willing to go to see Margaret Qualley's ass? Holy shit, the number of ass shots in this movie is ridiculous, which was obviously to accentuate a point, and I recognize it, and I appreciate that as a straight man. No, but as a bisexual man. But either way, it is. I just think that if you had told me this movie was written by Demi Moore, I would have, or even directed by Demi Moore, I would have 1000% believed it. Because there really is no one better suited for the starring role of Elizabeth Sparkle than Demi freaking Moore, who has been in many instances a pioneering person, a lightning rod for women in Hollywood, and the struggles for older women in Hollywood. You know, once they reach about 33, 34, they're about they're about ancient dust, according to people like Dennis Quaid's character. It's pretty much all stuffed into this critical mass of just one person, which I beautifully played. And yeah, just real quick, dude, Dennis Quaid is firing on all cylinders, and I love him. I love him for it. I am so glad that I didn't really see Reagan. I only get one of those movies a year, and I think I'm going to save it for God's Not Dead. But Dennis Quaid, I have a soft spot for Dennis Quaid, and this movie reminded me why I do. Just absolutely fantastic actor. And I'm glad that we all seem to be giving him somewhat of a pass. The wider culture has given him a pass. Like, okay, you did the Reagan thing. That's weird, but you're still a good actor. So we're gonna let you slide on this one. Could have been given to a better hack, a much worse hack. But for this movie in particular, man, at times it is just a stinging critique of Hollywood and American culture and popular media and all kinds of things revolving around such. And in so many ways, it is a hard hitting, face smashing critique of all of that. And quite often in this movie, it also turns into like high school level, like, see, this is what culture does to you. And in some of those ways, when the movie gets really into it, and obviously I was like this for the last 20 minutes, I was like this for it. I was like full on like stereotypical horror movie, body horror, like, oh my God, I can't look at this. I have not felt this way viscerally for a movie since Fall. Was the name of the movie Fall, where it's like the two main characters are like 100 feet up in the air or whatever, 100 miles up in the air.
Right.
I had Fall to myself. I was alone in that movie theater, so I was literally on my feet just pacing for Fall, just watching them, traverse the heights. For Substance, there were like 10 people in there, so I couldn't do that, but I was like wincing and all that stuff. But even then, and you know what? Kudos to this movie for just eliciting that kind of reaction from me. But even then, there were a few times where I was like, okay, you can get on with it. I think we get it. And I almost blurted that out a couple times in this movie. And for a movie that's 141 minutes, which what does that come up to? 2.5 hours, I think, right?
About 2 hours, 20 minutes.
2 hours and 20 minutes. I do wonder if it could have shaved a bit of that off. I understand that Farsha.
Yeah.
I understand Farsha is going for complete Kino here with a lot of those sequences, and I appreciate that. Right at the front, it tells you that this was it Venice Film Festival, either winner or a nominee or whatever. So it's like, okay, you're going for it right then and there. And man, the close-ups, like extreme close-ups, like you are looking at Dennis Quaid's like upper lip in his introduction. Wonderful, wonderful shot. Beautiful cinematography in here. Shout out to Benjamin Krakoon for their cinematography on The Substance. But I do wonder if, and I guess I should have saved this critique for a little bit later, but I do wonder if it maybe was a little heavy-handed isn't quite the correct word, but maybe like it laid it on thick for a little bit too long. But man, the point it's trying to convey and how it does it, just absolutely nothing left on the cutting room floor. I'm sure there were, but it didn't feel like that. I don't know how you think about that, Steve.
Yeah, like I said, there's a lot here to really chew on. It lives up to its name, at least in the fact that it gives you a lot to talk about too. I guess first things first, we talked about, you touched on it, was that Krakoon's cinematography is outstanding. The costume design here, I think, is marvelous work. I think all of it is, I mean, it's almost like, it's like Yorgos Lanthimos level weirdness and strangeness, but where Yorgos Lanthimos is like kind of reticent and like tries to like do a lot of weird things in like this proper context, where like Farja just goes for it. And in this day and age, I love the audaciousness of this, because there's so many movies nowadays that I feel like are so diluted, especially violent movies or especially like horror movies, or movies that have a potential to have a tremendous level of shock value. There's movies that are afraid to show knife wounds. This movie makes pretty damn clear early on that you are going to see everything in intense close-up. I think the scenes that really signal it are like Dennis Quaid's introduction. Fun fact, he's also a TV executive who plays a character named Harvey, which is also fun. Dennis Quaid, though, his introduction is in the bathroom, and the camera's mounted on the urinal, and he walks up to the urinal, so you see his facade in like full view. And then there's that disgustingly primal but hilarious scene of him like eating crawfish in an extreme close-up.
That was like top 3 disgusting moments for some reason, is him eating the seafood as opposed to anything else in this movie.
And like him, and like there's close-ups of him like when he talks, like flicking the crawfish, and then like the lip smacking. Like if you're somebody, that's a pet peeve of a lot of people. If you're somebody who like hates that like chewing noises or like lip smacking, like that scene is pure hell.
Yeah.
But it's so well done. So across the board, you have wonderful performances. You said it too. Demi Moore is like the poster child of actresses who is like on top of the world, but the older she got, the more kind of discarded she got. But she didn't go quietly about it either. She's been very vocal about it. And this is like a movie too that I think not only is it almost feels a little insulting to say it's her best performance in years, because it's like she hasn't been afforded very many like these or very many leading roles in the last 15 years. But it still is. She's a wonderfully conscious casting choice for Elizabeth, given the fact that she is kind of the model of this whole thing, this like youthful Hollywood it girl that was cast aside in recent years.
Goodness gracious, from her marriages to G.I. Jane, to her famous pregnancy photo shoot where she was naked on the cover of whatever magazine. G.I. Jane still making headlines since that was the inciting incident over the Chris Rock Will Smith, which is a whole different story. But I just thought that was really funny. But yeah, Demi Moore, I genuinely cannot think of anyone else who would be better cast for the role of Sparkle than her.
And Margaret Qualley's excellent too. This is another dynamic outing. I really feel like she's kind of like this chameleon actress, because she's
in like 4 movies. I looked at her Wikipedia. She's in like 4 movies that are in post-production or filming as of right now.
Well, she's had a hell of a year this year alone. I mean, Drive Away Dolls, we were kind of mixed on it, but Drive Away Dolls, she was in that. She was in Kinds of Kindness. She was in the Lanthimos movie Kind of Kindness earlier this year too.
Hmm.
She's like a chameleon though. She really is different. Like she looks different in every movie. She kind of plays different. And both, I think the most marvelous thing is that like Maureen Qualley, it's easy to overlook in some ways, but these two performances ask a ton of these
Hmm.
actresses in terms of like the costumes, the physicality, especially towards the end. The last like 40 minutes of this movie gets fucking capital T
It's
twisted.
like
Like, oh,
Resident Evil, like the first Resident Evil, or no, Resident Evil 2 or 3, like that level of just body horror and grossness. Although
Gonzo,
I'm sure if you asked her though,
kaiju
if you
shit.
asked Margaret Qualley, the Zumba sequences would probably be the hardest too. I don't know. That's insane. Jesus
And
Christ.
then there's the only one I'm not going to go into it because it takes way too much explanation and it's something you have to see. But involving Quayle, the chicken drumstick scene.
Yeah, what the
Uh,
heck was that about? I don't know.
well, that whole thing was
Was it a
basically
commentary on eating or like
yeah, I
her
think so. And
figure?
it was all like you are what you eat in a way, but it was also too like why it happened was also to show that like the actions of the
Oh,
one
I get it
person
now.
of impact the other
You're right.
because the
You're right.
next scene you see the apartment's covered in
Right.
food.
That was Demi
And
Moore's character. Okay, I get it now. I get it now.
right. Right. I think the shortcoming, I get the whole like, like kind of obvious themes and everything, though I do think that like in a way some of these themes are ignored to the point where they kind of have to be made obvious in some
Hmm.
ways. One of my only criticisms for the movie, one of its only shortcomings, I think, is it's a little bit flat-footed when it describes the rules of this thing.
When you say
Like
flat-footed, do you mean like it's vague or?
it's a little bit ambiguous
Mhm.
in the beginning, and I'll explain. Is that like so you're understood the very few rules of the substance is that you are one. Like Elizabeth and Sue are basically they're almost clones. It's like they're one body. They're
Mhm.
sharing their same organs and everything. But at first it appears that Elizabeth and Sue are connected. But when it slowly reveals that they both harbor their own agencies and their own sort of like like goals and aspirations. Like Sue doesn't give a shit about Elizabeth. You know what I mean? Like she's got her own career that's, looking at greater heights than Elizabeth's ever was. I wondered what the purpose of the substance is. If one cannot truly enjoy the pleasure of their younger self or live through those experiences and instead lies unconscious during it, then
What's the point? Yeah.
what's the point then? Because you run into there's another character that took the substance too, and it shows him and his older self too, and I don't understand. That's the only
I
thing I don't understand
I
about
assumed.
it.
Yeah. I don't know if it's ever made clear. I assumed that they are living the same life. There is a stream of consciousness, but like something about the younger self takes over to a good degree, where it's like now you're fighting like this inner battle. But I guess it's actually a separated battle, and we could debate that point for a while.
Because initially I thought Elizabeth was going to become Sue. And that's what I initially
Mhm.
thought. But then I'm like, no, Sue's her own person.
Susan a person, but I
She's
thought the
beholden.
consciousness was shifting between the tubes, which doesn't make sense. But I can suspend that disbelief. But
Yeah, yeah, and again, like the thing is, this is one of those movies too. It's not that complicated, and it plays better when you're watching it because I think it's very clearly articulated. There's also long stretches of this movie that don't have dialogue. There's also
mhm.
sizable stretches of this movie, whether it's Elizabeth's initial transformation or even just like Sue going about like going through her career and everything, where there's not a lot of dialogue, which is a really confident thing to do for a movie with this kind of premise where it explains itself. I think it explains itself very well. That was the only shortcoming I had though, was I'm like, I don't understand the purpose of the substance then if Elizabeth can't really reap the benefits of Sue and then instead is penalized then when Sue starts breaking the rules. Then that was the only thing I was a little hairy on. I thought that was a little bit odder than like
Mhm.
the fact that yeah, this movie is long. I didn't feel the length too much. I will say if you do feel the length, I think it really comes to that third act, which continues to double and triple down.
And the thing is,
But it's so you want to see where it goes though, and how it goes that way, and that's why I don't think that bothered me even that
the
much.
thing is, you see it coming like from the get go, right? Like as soon as it's like, here are bold lettered on this piece of paper. Here are bold lettered instructions, and it's like, you must do this once a day. You must do this every 7 days, and you know immediately, okay, she's not gonna do that. At some point, she's going to break those rules. And it leads to this kind of like Dorian Gray-esque, like moralistic ending and all that stuff.
Good reference.
It's not a one-to-one reference, but, you know, in terms of like, you know, getting uglier or, you know, stealing of youth as you engage in these pleasures, et cetera, et cetera. Not a one-to-one, but it definitely, it's like continuously building to this breaking point. And that's the number one thing I was just waiting for. It's like, okay, there it is. Yep. The discipline has begun to break down. They're starting to bend the rules, or at least one person is. And then inevitably you're just waiting for that final third act. And yeah, it definitely, I think it just overstayed its welcome. And here's the thing. It comes down, and we're getting into the critiques here, is that like, for the one I was hinting at earlier, is that it gets down to like moment by moment choices where it's like beating you over the head with the message. And I'm all like, you mentioned this earlier, Steve, where it's like messages like these, you kind of have to make them obvious. You know, it's like people who don't realize that Starship Troopers is a critique on fascism and authoritarianism, right? Right. People just think it's a really cool action movie, which it is, but, you know, etc. And I'm okay with that. I understand that. You can have something like Jojo Rabbit, where, okay, that's very clearly, there's no questioning that cannot be appropriated by the people of that stripe, political stripe. But for this movie, I still think it works to its disadvantage when it beats it over the head just a little bit too much. So, like, for instance, and again, it's a moment, it's a subjective thing, but I think when, you know, she Demi Moore goes into she finds the number of her old high school friend or whatever, and then it's like, okay, I understand what you're trying to do there. This character serves a purpose to get you going with the plot. But then it's like, it cuts to like an insert image of him going, "You're still the most beautiful person I ever met." And it's like, okay, that you laid it on a little bit too thick there. And this is very, very detailed critiques, but do you understand what I'm saying? And it's moments like that. Yeah. It's Dennis Quaid going, "Girls should always smile." And I'm not exaggerating there. He literally goes, pretty girls should always smile. And I'm like, okay, bro, like, this is getting a little BioShock, where it's like you're really, really laying it on thick, and I think it
leads to a great shot, though.
It does lead to a great shot, and you know what? And that's what I'm struggling with personally. It's like, do I go full throated on this critique or not? Because it leads to some wonderful, beautiful kino of just like the scene where Demi Moore is she's really suffering from some of the effects now, and she's going full like the most twisted episode of Julia Child that you can think of. You know what I'm talking about? That sequence where it's like, okay, this is making me laugh. That's the thing. Actually, I'll say that there were moments here where I feel like it was betraying what it wanted me to feel. So in that last, you know, quarter of the movie where it's like horrifying, it's like, this is supposed to be really sad and really destructive and all that. I'm just going like, bruh, just we get it already. We understand the blood here. We get it. But I understand they were trying to, I guess, convey a message. I'm a little conflicted on it. I think I just need to sit with it more. If this review had been had, because I watched the movie like, I think last night or 2 nights ago. I don't know. Do you know what I'm saying here, Steve?
No, I do. No, I know. I understand what you're saying. It's not. You're not the only one who feels this way. I get the whole that it doubles down on a lot of the critiques and the themes of ageism and Hollywood bias to the younger generation. I guess societal bias to you know what I mean, younger women and the hypersexuality that there often ensues and everything.
Against my point, there is a really, really funny scene where Margaret Qualley's character, she has an incident with her ass. And the whole studio stops. Like, wait, stop. Put that on the monitor. Let's go frame by frame. And it's turning into like it's like the Situation Room looking at the Bin Laden raid. And it's like, wait, frame, and it's so funny. I don't know if the intention was for me to laugh, but that's when I was laughing the absolute most. Was like them just like, and you know what? I think they were intending me to do this, because the obsession over frame by frame her ass. I think that was the message.
There's a lot of comedy here that I think is fun too, because it's not really
absurd.
specific. It's absurd, and it's got like the Yorgos Lanthimos quality to it, where you're not quite sure if you should laugh, and there's no really moment where something is going to be collectively viewed as funny.
Right.
Where and some
That's
of my favorite movies are like movies where Catherine and I'll be in the theater, and like maybe the two of us, or I, or me or her, are like the only one laughing.
Yeah,
like I love that, and that's what I got a lot of on this.
I do appreciate
too, where there's
that
like
quality.
there's a lot of subtle touches.
You're right.
That not everything in this movie is going to be viewed as collectively human.
Yeah, it really isn't. And as Steve potentially reconnects with his internet, we'll see. We have 3.5 minutes left here before the break. But for me, I guess my point is that it just lays it on a little thick, just a little bit too much. Okay, we got Steve back here.
I apologize about that. There's so many elements though that are this rich and coalesce so beautifully and brutally. Though I think that's what irons out a little bit more of this for me, maybe, than you, is that I think that this movie was it had a point. There's no real ambiguity in its message. It doesn't try to play. I don't think it does try to play both sides of the issue here. And when it comes to the grossness and the disgustingness of everything, it actually has the gall to show it. Which doesn't happen very often.
It's bold. You cannot deny that. It's absolutely bold in what it's trying to do. It's unabashed, and it's it's a hell of an experience. That main critique I'm giving is that maybe it lays it on either a little too thick or too thick for too long. I would rather take that over it doing half-heartedly. I will give it points for no matter what. I am thankful that it leaves nothing behind on its message, and it leaves nothing behind on what it wants you to feel.
Very well said. I think when we come back, we could probably give closing thoughts and then move into talking about National Cinema Day, whatever the hell's going to come of that here as well. So we'll be back here in just a couple of minutes. It's Sleepless with Steve live on YouTube. Back in a couple of minutes after our Zoom-sponsored intermission. Don't go anywhere. Back and better than ever, back from our Zoom workplace sponsored intermission. It is Sleepless with Steve live on YouTube. Gonna wrap up our discussion on the substance. And I really, really wish we could have got Joe's take on it too. Um, because I definitely think he would like this movie. I think that this is up his alley too. Criticisms, even, even we have a little bit of different criticisms here. Mine are mainly just because of some of the rule development. I think of this could have used a little bit better explanation, or maybe an explanation as to why the substance would be attractive in the first place. If as it appears that Elizabeth and Sue, while they are one and their effects on their body are shared mutually, it doesn't seem to benefit the existence of the other doesn't seem to benefit either of them, just except for the fact that they keep both one another alive. But at the same time, though, this movie has three tremendously strong performances in it. It has one of the most wickedly unpredictable third acts of any movie I've seen this year. And it also, too, just feels so audacious, as you described earlier, bold. I think that Demi Moore in this character is a delightful casting. I think it's strong casting. I think it's conscious casting. And I also think Margaret Qualley continues to solidify herself as like the next generation movie star that's going to take on big roles, but is also, I think, going to stay tapped into movies like Drive Away Dolls, working with really strong directors like Joel Cohen, or Ethan Cohen, rather, excuse me. Ethan Cohen, Yorgos Lanthimos, Coralie Faja. I think that she recognizes these visionaries, and she's completely willing to chameleon herself in these types of performances too. And again, I forgive Dennis Quaid for Reagan after this. This was definitely a good bounce back movie. At the very least, I forgot to mention this during the review, or when I brought his character up. He was not the first choice to play Harvey.
Really?
Who was originally supposed to play Harvey was Ray Liotta.
Oh, that would have been a good choice, but I mean, we'll never know, obviously, but I think Dennis Quaid has that kind of like positive charm, whereas Ray Liotta has like a menacing charm to him.
I can agree with. I think Ray Liotta would have done well, but I agree with you there.
Yeah.
Where Dennis Quaid can have like a smarminess and sort of like a positivity to him, where like Ray Liotta was really menace. That was one of his best attributes as an actor. As it stands, though, I give it 3.5 out of 4 stars. I think this is one of my favorite movies of the year. Probably not the last time I'm talking about it on Sleepless 2, either in just referential points or maybe in a certain end of the year list as we rapidly approach the end of 2024. I don't think this is the last time I'm going to bring this movie up, but it's 3.5 out of 4 stars for me. Gobsmacked in a way by how great it was and how much I enjoyed it.
This is the movie of Demi Moore's career, and I don't say that in the way that this is her best performance ever. I say it's literally the movie of her career and what she's been fighting for after she turned 34 or whatever. And the way that Hollywood treats you, the media treats you, American popular culture treats you as an older woman in Hollywood. It gets really brutal, gratuitousness, sexualization, et cetera, et cetera. All themes that are very important. And while it does lay it on just a little bit too much at times, again, like I said, it feels almost like high schooler, I'm so deep kind of esque moments. I think the most egregious for me was that scene. I thought they were going to do a really cool fake out with the quote unquote monster and all that stuff, where it's like it's playing At Last by Etta James. And everyone's like clapping and cheering and all that stuff. And I'm like, I don't know. It's a very subjective thing. For me, I thought that was a little bit too much, even though I get it. But there was a scene in here, I think, and it doesn't even involve body horror at all. The scene where Demi Moore is just her and she's trying to look nice for a night on the town to go on a date. And then she winds up just losing her self-confidence, and her vision of herself just completely plummets in real time as she keeps going back to the bathroom mirror. That scene was the most deeply affecting for me, actually. There's a visceralness to everything else, and that's good. I appreciate that. That's awesome. I'm not a body horror guy. It does make me squirm, but I appreciate it when it has a message. But for that scene, it didn't even need that, and it affected me the most. Like, God, the number of young women that must experience that, some level of that every day is just absolutely horrifying to think about. I think this movie should be watched by every parent who wants to make their kid a child actor or participate in a beauty pageant. I think you should watch this movie as a warning sign before you watch anything else. Anyway, this movie has a lot of substance to it. It's got a lot to say on a very specific topic. And it says, no matter how it says it, I'm glad that it went full-throated for it. I will always appreciate that. And that is why this is an easy 3.5 out of 4 stars for me.
Great review. I'm glad you weren't made too squeamish.
No, I mean, again, if it has a message to it,
which it does,
I'm all for it. And it's got a very important and poignant one.
Very good stuff. Very good review right there of The Substance. Now in theaters. Doing okay. It's kind of hard to market an R-rated 2.5 hour movie.
Yeah, it might become a technical bomb, but it's definitely going to have staying power. And it's going to be a good for Fajo's career no matter what, just because of the quality of the film. It's got to be.
Completely agree. That scene where Demi Moore tries to get ready for the date, that should be the clip they play when she's nominated for Best Actress.
They can't show anything else. They really can't. They really Oscars. Can't. Could you imagine the scene where she's the monster or something? That'd be so
either that or a couple clips of the cooking scene.
It's probably going to be that. I think it's the most kinetic out of all of them, but I agree with you. It should be the getting ready for the date scene. Yeah, the makeup scene.
Should be the makeup scene for her. I think this movie, I am quietly optimistic this thing is going to get quite a few Oscars.
It's gotta. I think
I am quietly optimistic.
I don't know about this thing screenplay, but it's probably Demi Moore, right? It's gotta, at least for Demi Moore.
I think it's gotta be, if I had it my way, it would be Demi Moore, Margaret Qualley, picture, director, costume, cinematography. It would be those 6 for nominations, because I don't know who else would be nominated. But as far as nominations are concerned, I think it deserves those 6.
Concur.
We'll move on. Don't have a ton to touch on with this, but I think it's just noteworthy just to kind of bring this back into the public consciousness. This was an article that Joe sent us from The Hollywood Reporter by Ethan Vlessing. And it says, the headline is, movie theater chains put $2.2 billion bet on box office rebound with new upgrades. This was kind of touching on to the lack of National Cinema Day. The lack of National Cinema Day. Now, if you remember what National Cinema Day really was, is it was something that kind of was parlayed because of the pandemic in 2021, I believe is when it started. And National Cinema Day was predicated on like offering discounted movie tickets, concession deals, and such to try to get people back to the theater. I think it was concurrent with Labor Day, or the week after Labor Day.
That feels right, yeah.
It was the weekend after Labor Day that they did it, because Labor Day is generally one of the worst movie weekends of the year. Everybody's traveling. Nobody, it's the collective end of summer. Nobody's really going to the movies. They don't really release anything. So it was the week after that they launched it, and it was an overwhelming success. It brought up box office receipts tremendously. The thing, however, that it did, and this is why there hasn't really been confirmation as to why, but the general consensus from the National Association of Theater Owners, the different NATO, as I like to say.
So funny. I love it. I freaking love it. I laughed at that name during the pandemic before the invasion, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And then when that broke out, I'm like, all right, yeah. I think they need to change the name, but it's whatever.
I do. Like, theater, I mean, they can't even do theater operators. But anyway, though, the National Association of Theater Owners, though, came out this year and said, because people noticed, they were like, there's no National Cinema Day. Why is that? And their consensus was, it was like too successful. And when I mean like that, it was the fact that it was too successful. I mean, tickets were discounted tremendously, like $5 tickets. And out here where we live, that's not a huge discount. That's a discount, but that's not a huge discount. But in markets like LA and Chicago and bigger cities, that's less than half of the cost of a movie ticket.
They movie passed themselves. Too good to be true.
They really did. But what they ultimately did, though, essentially was like, I think theater owners like AMC, Regal, Cinemark, Cineplex, Marcus Theaters, I think they're kind of to blame in a way too, because they didn't foresee what kind of impact this was going to have year after year, because it's been going on the last 3 years, and it essentially overwhelmed theaters. It overwhelmed
Yeah.
theaters to the point where they ran out of things. They didn't have adequate staffing. I mean, it's a good problem in the sense that it got people back to the theater. But essentially, what the National Association of Theater Owners came out and said last week was that they're looking to reformat it. And in order to reformat it, though, it's going to take seismic upgrades. It's going to take seismic upgrades because essentially what it is now is that you have like three different kinds of theaters. You have like your budget, I don't call them budget theaters, but you have kind of like second run cinemas that maybe have 1 to 4 screens that, are airing movies right now like Twisters and Reagan and Deadpool and Wolverine, movies that have been out for a couple of weeks or even a couple of months, and they're getting second run in theaters. You have those theaters. You have kind of what we have, the AMC out here in Eastern Iowa. You have kind of the AMCs that are still classically built. They have maybe 14 to 18 screens, but they don't have reserve seating. They have auditorium style seating. So it's not reclining chairs. It's just straight up seats. They have anywhere from maybe 100 to 700 or even 1,000 in some cases seats per theater. So you have those. And then you have your very fancy dine-in theater chains like AMC Dine-In, Phoenix Theaters. Regal's got a lot of those.
When was the last time you were in one of those?
Well, we have one out here, Phoenix. It's called Phoenix Theater. It's a smaller brand. It's a smaller corporation.
Do you go
they
those?
they have reclining seats. Generally, what Catherine and I do is we don't go there much because AMC Stubs is such a great deal. And the downside to Phoenix is that they only have 6 theaters. They only have 6 screens. So like it is, and I've talked to so many people out here about it because everybody goes to Phoenix, understandably. But I'm like, Phoenix is great, obviously, for the experience, which is what most people want. But for somebody like me, who's a critic, who's a volume critic too, who sees most of the new releases week to week, AMC is the much better option because it gets more. Because by virtue of having 14 screens versus 6. Because then and then it sucks too. I mean, it's great for them, but it sucks. Like when you get a movie like Twisters or Deadpool and Wolverine, that's 3 screens out of 6. That's half your screens right there because of how many times you need to air that movie. But Phoenix, the last time we were there was South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut was in June. That was the last time we were there because Phoenix, I'll tell you right now, Phoenix gets more of the one night only
Like Fathom
showings,
events kind of things.
Fathom events. Yep. Because I saw Clerks 3 there. I saw Jeepers Creepers 4 there. AMC's gotten a little better with it. They got Rift Tracks about a month or two ago. So we saw that, but so they've gotten a little bit better with it. I think the demand's back, but Phoenix is always more reliable for the Fathom events and the one night only events, things like that. But this article though by Ethan Vlessing basically talks about how movie exhibitors, all the big chains are set to cumulatively invest $2.2 billion in theater upgrades because the box office has really tremendously rebounded this year. It was looking a little nerve wracking in the beginning of summer when you had some sizable bombs.
This summer?
Yeah, this summer. It was looking a little like The Fall Guy. And I go back to, especially after talking to James Berardinelli, the film critic for Real Views, I go back to that movie being the wrong movie to open the summer movie season. Same with Furiosa.
Yeah, it should have been
like Twisters.
Twisters, thank you.
Twisters should have been the Memorial Day weekend movie.
Yeah.
I'm surprised it had the staying power it did. It's a name in itself.
That's such a Midwest movie, and obviously extremely biased to a fault. But like Memorial Day and Labor Day are like two like extremely Midwestern holidays in my mind, just because of the cookout mentality. But yeah, I that makes so much sense.
Like The Fall Guy was like, based off of a TV series that really has no staying power anymore. As great of a movie as it was, like Furiosa and Fall Guy were both great movies, which is why it really sucked that they bombed. But they were sort of the wrong barometer because then Inside Out 2 came out and everybody was like, does Pixar still going to have the draw? And Inside Out 2, I think, is now among their highest grossing movies ever made.
All the trauma-filled millennials.
So you had a strong summer then, too. I mean, you had Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. You had Twisters, you had Deadpool and Wolverine. You had kind of a slew of weird shit come out in August, though, but that's generally par for the course. But movies you were clearly that were clearly designed to be bigger than they were, like Borderlands and The Crow were just dead on arrival. Like nobody cared. Like The Crow, no, the one movie Borderlands was such a fucking failure that nobody talks about how bad The Crow did. Like, and The Crow was awful too. The Crow in some ways pissed me off more than Borderlands, but like The Crow was what was awful, and it by virtue of following Borderlands and Borderlands being such a joke in itself, like we don't really talk about how bad. Like The Crow made like I think like cost $50 million to make, $100+ million to market. The fucking thing made $3 million opening weekend.
Ooh, boy!
Like my God! And then we don't want to talk the biggest fucking atrocity this summer was Harold and the Purple Crayon, but I don't even want to talk about that crap. But anyway though, basically theaters are going to invest quite a bit of money, which I'll be interested to see what happens if anything happens with the theater over here, with the AMC over here, because how AMC, and that's really just the kind of default that I have having most of my movie going experiences, I would say like 70% be from AMC.
Mm-hmm.
When they rolled out the dine-in, like the dine-in theaters are not new. At least they weren't to me. The dine-in theater back where I grew up, that got remodeled in like 2013, 14. I want to say it was right when like American Hustle came out. It was right when like American Hustle and Boyhood came out.
Mm-hmm.
So it was about then. And I saw it even then as kind of the new wave. But it's funny though, having now lived in like smaller areas than where I grew up, and I'll pass it over to you after I just get this part out. I'll tell you, man, I've been to quite a few different AMCs. And like I would argue the vast majority of AMC theaters need some form of capital improvement. I'll be the first one to tell you, having gone to like probably 8 to 10 in my life. Like back where I used to live, LaSalle, Peru, that is easily, the AMC Peru is easily the worst fucking theater I've ever been in. Easily. Even they redid it. They put in reclining seats like a few months before I moved, and I saw a few movies there, and it was better. But the layout of that theater is horrible. The infrastructure was terrible. It used to be what AMC did was in Peru specifically, it was a Carmike theater. Way before I moved there.
Okay.
It was a Carmike. And basically what AMC did was they bought a ton of these small hometown AMC or these small hometown movie theaters in towns like relative to us, Illinois, like Morris, and
then
Peru.
you slap the AMC logo on them, right?
But they called it AMC Classic. They call them AMC Classic, which I long joke is their excuse for not updating them by calling them AMC Classic, because that's part of their brand too. The other difference with AMC Classic theaters in these smaller communities, because the one out here is technically an AMC Classic, even though it's bigger than most. The difference is, and this is not at every AMC, and I learned this when I moved to Peru, it's the popcorn bucket thing. I don't know if you've ever seen this or are familiar with this. These AMC Classics, what they do to try to encourage small town loyalty, I have one, is they have a popcorn bucket. It's an annual thing. You pay $20 at the start of the year for the bucket. Might be $24 now, but you pay like $20 to $24, and then when you bring it back to the theater, it's $5.29, I think, to refill it. And honestly, I did the math and checked my math with somebody else who did the math. It is incredibly, after the 8th bucket, it really starts paying for itself. If you compare the cost of a large popcorn to the cost of the bucket initially with each subsequent refill, your cost winds up getting substantially less than if you bought a large popcorn.
And it's a bucket. It's like a large bucket.
There's more popcorn in that than a large. There's more popcorn in that.
I could not, as good of a deal as that, and I like a good deal like that for someone who watches a movie every week or two. I can't have that. I just can't have that. But that's very Dubuque or Peru. That's very Iowa. Very Midwest.
No, it was at the Peru. I didn't go to the Peru theater very often. I went to the Ottawa, Illinois theater more. It was like 15 miles away, but it was slightly nicer and had more screens. That's why I went there. But anyway, the popcorn bucket thing is the big difference between the AMC Classics and the other brands too. And you get a free refill too, which does wonders for the caloric intake. What say you about this? I'd be interested to see, like, it's just kind of like numbers right now, like $2.2 billion invested over these theater chains. I think it's going to be a little bit more fascinating when the blueprints start leaking. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean the National Cinema Day, right?
Yeah.
It was an emergency measure for COVID, and then once it fulfilled its purpose, we repeal the measure. It does suck because it's like it does send the message that, hey, we celebrate cinema in the theater, and then now that we're in the green again, it's like forget it. But that's Hollywood for you. But
That is true.
in terms of the business side of things, because like what else can you do? 3D it's not dead, but no one's fallen for that fad again, I think. IMAX is really its own special world for Nolan heads and people who really people like you who really invest into that stuff, and Joe as well. So, and the movie, the dine-in experience, I do wonder if that's reached its peak. Certainly it's not a fad if it's still here, right? But it's as a novelty. There you go. As a novelty, it's really reached its peak. So that does beg the question: what do they have left in their pocket? I really don't know, other than service at that point, or like availability of shows. And clearly I'm not the guy to be pitching these ideas if I got nothing.
Food, like that's the other thing these AMC dine-ins offer besides the reclining seats is the
what am I
fact that
saying?
they have seat side service in a lot of these places. Like, now don't get me wrong, it costs like fucking $18 for like chicken tenders or something like that.
It's
But
the
if you
markup,
want- it's a huge markup. If you want to eat though, and like you don't feel like going to a restaurant and you want to eat there, that is a way to do it. The thing that annoys me though about the dine-in theaters, and the one Phoenix out here technically isn't. It's more exclusive to AMC.
Yeah.
But like the times I would go to an AMC dine-in theater, the only thing that was annoying was like you have these trays that are connected to your seat. The thing that's annoying though is that like during the movie you can press a button and order something.
I don't
in
like
your
that.
seat. That is fucking distracting as hell when you're trying to watch a movie.
It really, in my mind, I save those visits to a dine-in theater for like a Star Wars movie or a Marvel movie where it's like, okay, not to shit on the incredible capacity that any movie can have to say something, but we know how those movies are, right? Where it's like, yeah, I'm just here to watch Batman. No, actually, no, Batman, not Batman. But like, I'm here to watch Iron Man punch someone in the face. That's what I'm there for. So I don't care. But we're not the demographic for that, right?
No, we're not.
This is for the Fast and Furious demographic. So Joe, but you know what I'm saying. So it's here to stay. I personally, I'm eating crow, as you say. I thought eating even more shit at the theater was a bit of a fad that would have died out by the 2010s. But here we are, back more than ever. I forgot this. We might be seeing a return of the merchandising thing, because that died down for a little bit too, where people really didn't care about thing. But the Dune popcorn bucket, because it was a joke, right? Because it was a meme, and honestly, they designed that thing to look like a fleshlight. It turned into it breathed life into its own thing. Now that has way more potential to be a fad. But we will see. I mean, Deadpool and Wolverine, you could argue it's just a leeching off of that fad. So
for the bigger movies, like the popcorn buckets, they're very hit and miss.
Yes.
Like as far as what people go for. Obviously the Dune one and the Deadpool and Wolverine ones were the exception. The Mean Girls one I know was pretty popular too. That was the Burn book.
Yeah.
That was a pretty popular one even on the internet too. But then there's like a few, like it's funny, like going back, like the theater that we go to, they still have Wish popcorn buckets.
Wish?
Like Wish, the Disney movie from last Thanksgiving.
Okay, yeah.
They still have If popcorn buckets.
I see. I think that's just funny. You know, it's like
And I've said before, I'm not crazy about them, but I'm glad they exist.
Part of me is like, I appreciate it. Part of me is like more plastic shit. But do you ever watch the movie Waiting for Guffman? It's a Christopher Guest movie from like the.
I've never seen that one.
Okay.
No.
The end of that movie, it's a gag where the character is they run a gift shop for like really obscure shit. So it's like, here's a remains of the day lunchbox. It's like shit like that. Or it's like, okay, that's really funny.
I'll show you my closet. I got Action Point T-shirts.
Yeah. And as someone who hates stuff, I hate it just in my life in general. I should be railing against this, but part of me does have a fondness for stuff, shit like that. And as long as it tries to pertain to the movie itself, so don't force a popcorn bucket on every freaking movie, which they will. But I don't know, if you can come up with something kitschy like that, I guess that can be cute. But other than that, what other big thing do movies have up their sleeve so that they're not as big of a slave to the seasonal thing? Well, they always will be, right? I don't know. Let's brain something right now. This is for not for Zaslav, but for NATO, for our friends at NATO. How will we contribute to this war effort against consumer apathy? I really can't think of anything. Which is why we're not in this business.
It's true. Not the idea business, but the talking.
Make
business.
better movies. Sure. Oh, I guess no. You got the Fathom events, right? What? I don't really go to much Fathom events. That's unfortunate. Because I really want to.
They've started getting smarter and making some of them more than one day. They've started making some of them week-long engagements.
Yes.
Because I said, like, that's the challenging part, is that they're Thursdays. Mm-hmm. And I said, I don't know if this would make them more money, but I've said this, though. Like, our AMC doesn't have an IMAX. IMAX tickets are included in stubs. So we kind of get screwed on that because of the fact that not having an IMAX, we don't have the option to see IMAX tickets, which are covered by stubs. I've held this opinion for a while. I think that if your local AMC does not have an IMAX and you have a Stubs account, then the Fathom event should count for the IMAX.
Ooh, I like that. That is
because it's bullshit.
That's too detailed. That's too detailed of a detail to for them to give a shit. But I completely agree.
As a recurring, Catherine will attest to this too, as recurring moviegoers, though, it's incredibly aggravating. Like, we pay $20 a month, which is a hell of a deal for Stubs. We pay $20 a month. But at the same time, though, we don't have the option of IMAX because just by the virtue that our theater doesn't have it. So, like, and there's a lot of theaters. The Peru one obviously didn't have an IMAX either, and they offer Stubs. There's a ton. AMC Morris doesn't have an IMAX. There's a ton of AMCs, especially these AMC Classics, that offer Stubs as a subscription that do not have IMAX capabilities, which is fine. But I think then, if that's the trade-off, then I should be able to use one of my movie reservations for a Fathom event, because it's almost insulting to not have the IMAX, the opportunity to see an IMAX movie, number one, and then number two, if I want to see a Fathom event, it's like $15 on top of you're paying $20 a month, and IMAX tickets are about the same as that. That's
BS. Fathom Events always does the anime showings. Whenever there's a big anime show, like Sword Art Online. But I wanted to watch the Cowboy Bebop re-release, but that was one night only. I wanted to watch Blue Note. I don't know. It's a jazz anime. That shit's up my alley. But it was actually they weren't even showing it at the Bolingbrook Regal. It was only the Chicago ones. And there was only 3 in the Chicagoland area, 1 in Bolingbrook and 2 in the city of Chicago. So I'm very blessed in that sense. So you know what? That's okay. Thank you. But you should be showing more anime at this theater. I don't know.
Show more anime as long as I can still see Megalopolis. that's my takeaway.
So stupid. I'm like, come on.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if we see our manager friend there tomorrow, she's gonna get an earful from us, or me, probably more me. But
and you're showing like really old stuff that I appreciate, but not really old stuff. But like Mask of the Phantasm, love it, thank you, oh yeah, hell yeah. But why are you bumping Megalopolis for that? That's insane to me. I don't know.
I don't get it. We will quit here though tonight.
Yeah.
It's been a great show. Next week, I'll have to let Joe know, but due to my theater's insufficiencies, we'll have to see The Wild Robot, which I'm not taking as a consolation prize either, because I've heard a lot of great things about this movie. This movie looks really spectacularly animated, if nothing else.
Robot dreams to wild robots.
Yes, indeed. It's been a year of robots, a month of robots, we should say. So we will tackle The Wild Robot on Sleepless with Steve next week. Shout out to you, Dom, for running the show in Joe's absence. Joe should be back next
I messed up the cinematography. I'm sorry.
We will be a trio once again next week. But this was a great show, great movie, great discussion. Always appreciate it. For Dominic Guanzon, the unseen but still love Joe Viso, and yours truly, this has been Sleepless with Steve.